The radio crackled, then died. Oberleutnant zur See Klaus Richter stared at the dead console, the faint scent of ozone stinging his nostrils. The U-977 shuddered, a low groan echoing through the cramped metal hull. He swiped sweat from his brow, the chill of the Atlantic clinging to his skin despite the oppressive humidity inside the submarine. Outside, the unforgiving ocean pressed in, eager to claim them. "Report," he barked, his voice strained. The question bounced off the consoles and bunks. A young radioman, barely more than a boy, stammered, "Sir, the antenna, it's gone." "Sheared off, I think," Richter cursed under his breath. Damaged in the last depth charge attack, the antenna had been their lifeline. Now silence. Utter, terrifying silence. "Try the emergency transmitter." He barked, "Now, son!" "Before it's too late." The young man scrambled, his hands shaking as he wrestled with the backup equipment. Richter turned to his first officer, Oberleutnant Schmidt. "Depth?" Schmidt consulted the gauges. 200 meters, sir. Still descending. "Can we stop her?" Schmidt's face was grim. "The ballast tanks are compromised. We're taking on water faster than we can pump it out." He ran his tongue across his dry lips, his eyes darting around the control room. "It's not looking good, Klaus." Klaus ignored the use of his first name, a sign of Schmidt's growing desperation. He had a duty to maintain order, even as the cold reality of their situation settled in. "What about the damage reports?" "Every compartment reports flooding. The engine room, they say it's nearly impossible to reach them, sir. There's too much water." Richter felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "The engine room! If they lost the engines, they were truly lost." He grabbed the intercom microphone. "Engine room, this is the captain. Report." Only static answered him. "Engine room, do you read me?" He repeated, his voice rising. Still nothing. The silence was deafening. The young radio man, his face white with panic, looked up. "Sir, I think I got something." He adjusted the dials frantically. A burst of static, then a fragmented voice, weak and distorted. "U-977 sinking, tell my wife." The voice broke off, followed by a final, agonizing shriek. Then silence. The radio man slumped in his chair, tears welling in his eyes. Richter gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. "That's it," Schmidt said softly. "Isn't it?" Richter closed his eyes. He thought of his own wife, Elizabeth, her warm smile, the way her hair caught the sunlight. He would never see her again. He opened his eyes, his gaze hardening. "Prepare a final transmission." Schmidt looked at him, questioning. "Sir, we will not die in silence. We will report our fate, and we will do it with honor." He cleared his throat and took the microphone. His voice was steady, betraying none of the fear that gnawed at him. "This is U-977 to German High Command. We are experiencing catastrophic flooding. All attempts to surface have failed. We are sinking. Coordinates." He rattled off their last known position. "Tell my wife." He hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "Tell my wife I love her." He paused, listening to the static. Then, with a sigh, he finished. "Silence." He released the microphone. A new, more violent shudder ripped through the U-boat. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the control room into near darkness. Only the faint glow of the emergency lamps illuminated the faces of his crew, their eyes wide with terror. "All hands," Richter said, his voice calm but firm. "Prepare for the end." The ocean was coming for them, and there was nothing they could do but wait. The cold seeped deeper into the bones. The hull groaned again, louder this time. Then a sound like a million fingernails scratching across metal. The water trickling down the walls became a steady stream. "Brace for impact," Schmidt yelled. Richter braced himself against the console, the taste of salt and fear filling his mouth. The U-977 lurched violently, then settled, tilting at an impossible angle. The last thing Klaus Richter saw was the ocean rushing in, a dark, cold embrace. Chapter 2. Elizabeth Richter clutched the worn photograph to her chest, her fingers tracing the outline of Klaus' face. The paper was thin, almost transparent. Klaus laughing, the sun reflecting in his blue eyes. A lifetime ago, or so it seemed. The telegram had arrived 3 weeks ago. A brief impersonal message stating that U-977 was missing and presumed lost. Missing and presumed lost. The words echoed in her mind, hollow and meaningless. She refused to believe it. Klaus was strong, resourceful. He would find a way. He had to. She glanced around the small apartment, the silence heavy and oppressive. The war had taken so much. Her parents killed in a bombing raid, her brother lost on the Eastern Front, and now perhaps Klaus. A knock at the door startled her. She hesitated, then crossed the room and opened it. Standing on the doorstep was a man in a crisp Kriegsmarine uniform. His face was stern, his eyes cold. "Frau Richter?" he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Elizabeth nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "I am Captain Lieutenant Weber. I have been assigned to inform you of the official Kriegsmarine position regarding the fate of U-977. Elizabeth's breath caught in her throat. She knew what was coming. "Please come in," she said, stepping aside. Weber entered the apartment, his gaze sweeping over the meager furnishings. He stood stiffly in the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. "Frau Richter," he began, his voice formal. "After exhaustive searches, and based on all available evidence, the Kriegsmarine has concluded that U-977 was lost at sea with all hands." Elizabeth felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She reached out and grabbed the back of a chair for support. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible. There must be some mistake." Weber's expression remained unchanged. "I assure you, Frau Richter, there is no mistake. The U-977 is gone." But the last transmission," Elizabeth stammered. "The radio man," he said. Weber cut her off. "The last transmission was garbled and incomplete. It provides no evidence to suggest that any of the crew survived." He paused, then reached into his tunic and withdrew a sealed envelope. "This is a formal statement from the Kriegsmarine. It details the circumstances of U-977's disappearance and provides information regarding survivor benefits." Elizabeth stared at the envelope, her hands trembling. She didn't want to touch it. She didn't want to accept it. "I don't want your statement," she said, her voice rising. "I want my husband back." Weber sighed, his face softening slightly. "I understand your grief, Frau Richter, but you must accept reality. Klaus Richter is dead." He placed the envelope on the table and turned to leave. "There is one more thing," he said, pausing at the door. "There have been rumors, whispers about U-977's final mission." Elizabeth frowned. "What rumors?" Weber hesitated. "Rumors that U-977 was not on a routine patrol. Rumors that it was carrying something of great importance." Elizabeth felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you saying?" Weber shook his head. "I am saying nothing. Only that you should be careful. Some people, they might be interested in what Klaus knew." He gave her a curt nod and left the apartment. Elizabeth stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door. What had Weber meant? What was Klaus carrying? And who would be interested in what he knew? She picked up the photograph again, her fingers tracing Klaus' face. A new fear gripped her, not just the fear of loss, but the fear of something else, something dark and dangerous. She looked at the telegram on the table. The official version, a lie. The radio crackled in her memory. U-977 sinking, tell my wife. She knew in that moment she had to find out the truth, not just for herself, but for Klaus. The air was thick with unspoken secrets. Chapter 3. Elizabeth started her search with Klaus's old comrades. Men he had served with before U-977. Men who might know something. She found them scattered across Germany, some still in uniform, others trying to rebuild their lives in the shattered remains of their country. The first few were dead ends. They offered condolences, shared stories of Klaus's bravery, but knew nothing of U-977's final mission. Then in Hamburg, she found Obermatt Werner. He was a broken man, haunted by the horrors he had witnessed at sea. He was reluctant to speak at first, his eyes filled with suspicion. He kept looking around like someone was watching them. "Why do you want to know about the U-977, Frau Richter?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Elizabeth explained what Captain Lieutenant Weber had said. The rumors, the whispers. Werner's face grew pale. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, his eyes darting around the dimly lit bar. "Weber, he knows more than he's letting on," Werner said, his voice trembling. "The U-977, it was no ordinary patrol. It was a special mission." Elizabeth leaned forward, her heart pounding. "What kind of mission?" Werner hesitated, then took a deep breath. "They were transporting something. Something valuable. Something that the Frere himself had ordered to be moved." "What was it?" Elizabeth pressed. "What were they carrying?" Werner shook his head. "I don't know. No one knew except for Klaus and a few high-ranking officers. It was all very secretive. They loaded it onto the U-977 in the dead of night, under heavy guard. I saw the crates. Large wooden crates marked with strange symbols. Yuanjun reinforcements that never came. That's all I remember. Elizabeth frowned. Symbols? What kind of symbols? Werner struggled to remember. I can't, it was too dark. But they were ancient, I think. Like something from a museum. He took another deep breath, his eyes filled with fear. Frau Richter, you need to be careful. This is dangerous. Very dangerous. Some people would kill to get their hands on what was on that U-boat. Elizabeth felt a chill run down her spine. Who? Werner shook his head again. I don't know, but they are powerful. They have eyes everywhere. He paused, then leaned closer, his voice barely audible. There was another thing, a rumor. A rumor that the U-977 was headed not west, as everyone believed, but south, towards Argentina. Argentina, a haven for Nazi war criminals. Why would Klaus go there? Elizabeth felt a growing sense of unease. The picture was becoming clearer, but it was also becoming more frightening. Thank you, Werner, she said, rising to her feet. You've been very helpful. Werner grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. Frau Richter, please. Forget about this. Let it go. For your own safety. Elizabeth looked into his eyes, saw the fear etched on his face. She knew he was right. She should walk away. But she couldn't, not now. Not when she was so close to the truth. I can't, she said softly. I have to know what happened to my husband. Werner sighed, his shoulders slumping. Then God help you, Frau Richter. You're going to need it. As Elizabeth left the bar, she felt a pair of eyes on her. She glanced around but saw nothing. Just shadows and darkness. But she knew they were there, watching, waiting. The scent of rain and diesel filled the air, a grim reminder of the war's lingering presence. The search for the truth had begun in earnest. Chapter 4. Elizabeth traveled to Wilhelmshaven, the U-977's home port. She hoped to find some record of the submarine's final orders, some clue as to its true destination. The naval base was a shell of its former self, scarred by Allied bombing raids. The once proud fleet was reduced to a handful of rusting hulks. The atmosphere was one of defeat and despair. She managed to find a former records clerk, a Frau Schmidt, who had worked in the U-boat command center. Frau Schmidt was a timid woman, living in a small, cramped apartment on the outskirts of the city. She was initially reluctant to speak, fearing repercussions from the occupying Allied forces. But Elizabeth persisted, pleading with her, explaining her situation. Finally, Frau Schmidt relented. I don't know much, Frau Richter, she said, her voice trembling, but I remember something. Something strange about the U-977's departure. What is it? Elizabeth asked, her heart pounding. The orders, they weren't filed through the proper channels. They came directly from Berlin, from the Freres' headquarters, and they were encrypted, more heavily encrypted than usual. Elizabeth frowned. Encrypted? What does that mean? It means that only a select few people knew the true destination of the U-977, and they didn't want anyone else to find out. Frau Schmidt hesitated, then leaned closer. There was a code name, a single word that was repeated throughout the orders. Valhalla. Valhalla. The Hall of the Slain in Norse mythology. What did it mean? Do you know what Valhalla refers to? Elizabeth asked. Frau Schmidt shook her head. No, but I remember hearing rumors that it was a secret project. Something the Frere was obsessed with. Elizabeth felt a chill run down her spine. A secret project? What kind of project? I don't know, but I heard whispers about ancient artifacts, about hidden knowledge, about the key to winning the war. Elizabeth stared at her, her mind racing. Ancient artifacts? Hidden knowledge? The Frere obsessed with winning the war? It sounded like something out of a fantasy novel. But then she remembered what Werner had said about the symbols on the crates. Ancient symbols, like something from a museum. Could it be that the U-977 was carrying something more than just valuable cargo? Something mystical? Do you know anything about these artifacts? Elizabeth asked. Frau Schmidt shook her head again. No, but I heard that they were being transported to a secure location, somewhere far away from the fighting. Where? Elizabeth pressed. Where were they being taken? Frau Schmidt hesitated. I don't know for sure, but I heard someone say Argentina, the same place Werner had said. It was one possible destination. The other, She paused, looking pale. Antarctica, Antarctica, the frozen wasteland at the bottom of the world. What could be hidden there? Elizabeth felt a sense of growing dread. The deeper she dug, the more dangerous the truth seemed to be. As she left Frau Schmidt's apartment, she noticed a black car parked across the street. A man was sitting inside, watching her. He wore a dark coat and a fedora, his face hidden in the shadows. Elizabeth's blood ran cold. She knew she was being followed. They knew she was getting close. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to get away. She had to protect herself. But she also knew that she couldn't stop now. Not when she was on the verge of uncovering the truth. The man in the car started the engine. Elizabeth ran. The chill of the wind cut through her coat. The city was a maze of rubble and shadows. Chapter 5. Elizabeth managed to evade the man in the black car, losing him in the warren of bombed-out streets. She knew she couldn't stay in Wilhelmshaven. It was too dangerous. She had to find a safe place to regroup, to plan her next move. She decided to go to Berlin. She had an old friend there, a journalist named Anna who might be able to help her. Anna was resourceful and well-connected. She might know someone who could shed some light on the Valhalla project and the artifacts the U-977 was carrying. Getting to Berlin was difficult. The city was under Allied occupation, and travel was heavily restricted. But Elizabeth managed to hitch a ride on a supply truck, hiding in the back among crates of food and medicine. When she finally arrived in Berlin, she found the city in ruins. Buildings were reduced to rubble, streets were choked with debris, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke and decay. Anna's apartment building was still standing, but it was badly damaged. The windows were boarded up and the walls were cracked and blackened. Elizabeth knocked on the door, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure if Anna was even still alive. After a long wait, the door creaked open. Anna stood there looking gaunt and weary. Her eyes widened when she saw Elizabeth. "Elizabeth, what are you doing here?" she exclaimed, pulling her inside. Anna's apartment was small and sparsely furnished, but it was warm and dry, a welcome respite from the cold and desolation outside. Elizabeth explained her situation to Anna, telling her everything she had learned about the U-977's mission and the Valhalla project. Anna listened intently, her expression growing increasingly grave. "This is incredible," she said when Elizabeth finished. "And very dangerous. The Valhalla project, I've heard whispers about it, but I never thought it was real." "What do you know about it?" Elizabeth asked. Anna hesitated. "Only that it was a pet project of Himmler's, something to do with ancient history and the occult. He believed that by finding certain artifacts, he could unlock the secrets of the Aryan race and ensure Germany's victory." Elizabeth felt a chill run down her spine. Himmler, the architect of the Holocaust. What kind of madness had he been involved in? "Do you know what kind of artifacts they were looking for?" she asked. Anna shook her head. "No, but I know someone who might. An old professor at the university. He was involved in some of Himmler's research projects. He might know something about the Valhalla project. Can you take me to him?" Elizabeth asked. Anna hesitated. "It's risky. He's being watched by the Allies. They suspect him of being a Nazi sympathizer." "I don't care," Elizabeth said. "I have to find out what happened to Klaus." Anna sighed. "All right, but be careful. This could be a trap." The next day, Anna took Elizabeth to see Professor Meyer. He was a frail old man living in a dilapidated house on the outskirts of the city. He was initially reluctant to speak, fearing that he would be arrested by the Allies. But Anna convinced him that Elizabeth was trustworthy and that she was only seeking the truth. Professor Meyer finally relented. He led them to his study, a room filled with books and ancient artifacts. "The Valhalla project," he said, his voice trembling. It was Himmler's obsession. He believed that the Aryan race was descended from a superior civilization that possessed incredible knowledge and power. And he thought he could find that knowledge in ancient artifacts. Elizabeth asked. Professor Meyer nodded. Yes, he believed that certain artifacts held the key to unlocking the secrets of the past. He sent expeditions all over the world searching for these objects. "What about the artifacts on the U-977? Elizabeth asked. "Do you know what they were?" Professor Meyer hesitated. I can't be sure, but I believe they were fragments of an ancient tablet. A tablet said to contain the secrets of creation. "The secrets of creation," Elizabeth repeated, incredulous. Yes, Professor Meyer said. Himmler believed that by possessing this tablet, he could gain ultimate power. He could control the destiny of the world. Elizabeth felt a sense of growing horror. The Valhalla project was even more insane than she had imagined. Do you know where the U-977 was headed? She asked. Professor Meyer shook his head. No, but I heard rumors that they were going to Antarctica, to a secret base that Himmler had built there. Antarctica, the frozen wasteland, a secret Nazi base. It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, but Elizabeth knew it was real. She could feel it in her bones. As she left Professor Meyer's house, she noticed a figure lurking in the shadows. A man in a dark coat and a fedora, the same man who had been following her in Wilhelmshaven. She was out of time. They knew she was getting too close. Escape was impossible. The past was not done with her. Chapter 6. Elizabeth and Anna fled Professor Meyer's house, the man in the dark coat hot on their heels. They managed to lose him in the labyrinthine streets of Berlin, but they knew it was only a matter of time before he found them again. They needed to find a way to get to Antarctica. But how? They had no money, no contacts, and no way to travel to the other side of the world. Anna had an idea. She knew a former Luftwaffe pilot, a man named Erich, who had deserted from the military and was now living in hiding. Erich was a skilled pilot and might be able to help them find a way to get to South America, from where they could travel to Antarctica. They tracked Erich down to a bombed-out airfield on the outskirts of Berlin. He was living in a derelict hangar, surrounded by the wreckage of crashed planes. Erich was a gruff and cynical man, disillusioned with the war and the Nazi regime. He was reluctant to get involved in Elizabeth's quest, fearing that it would bring him unwanted attention, but Elizabeth pleaded with him, telling him about her husband and the Valhalla project. She appealed to his sense of justice and his hatred of the Nazis. Finally, Erich relented. He agreed to help them. I know a man in Argentina, he said, a former U-boat commander. He might be able to help you get to Antarctica. How? Elizabeth asked. He has contacts with the Argentine Navy. He might be able to arrange passage on a research vessel. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope. Erich helped them obtain false papers and arranged for them to travel to Hamburg. From there, they could board a cargo ship bound for Buenos Aires. The journey was fraught with danger. They had to avoid Allied checkpoints and navigate through the chaos and devastation of post-war Germany. But they made it to Hamburg and managed to board the cargo ship. Undetected, the voyage to Argentina was long and arduous. The ship was overcrowded and uncomfortable, and the food was scarce. But Elizabeth and Anna persevered, determined to reach their destination. As they approached Buenos Aires, Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She noticed a man on board the ship who seemed to be paying them an unusual amount of attention. He was tall and well-dressed, with a cold, calculating gaze. Elizabeth suspected that he was one of the men who had been following her. He was getting closer. When they arrived in Buenos Aires, Erich's contact met them at the docks. He was a grizzled old man with a weathered face and piercing blue eyes. He introduced himself as Captain Zursee, captain at sea, meldete Müller, took them to a safe house in a run-down neighborhood of the city. He listened intently as Elizabeth told him about her quest. I know about the U-977, he said when she finished, and I know about the Valhalla project. It was a madman's dream. Can you help us get to Antarctica? Elizabeth asked. Mozilla hesitated. It's dangerous. The Antarctic is a vast and unforgiving place, and there are rumors of a secret Nazi base there. We have to go, Elizabeth said. I have to find out what happened to my husband, Mamala sighed. All right, I'll help you. I have contacts with the Argentine Navy. I can arrange for you to travel to Antarctica on a research vessel, but there was a catch. Damatla needed something in return. He knew that Elizabeth was in possession of the last transmission from U-977. The transmission contained sensitive information that Matala needed for his own purposes. Elizabeth was reluctant to give up the transmission. It was one of the few tangible links she had to her husband. But she knew that she had no choice. If she wanted to get to Antarctica, she had to trust Madmala. She handed him a copy of the transmission, keeping the original hidden. Fowler examined it carefully, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Very good, he said. I'll make the arrangements. You'll leave for Antarctica in 3 days. As Mamsela left the safe house, Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that she had made a mistake. She didn't trust him. She felt like she had walked into a trap. She looked out the window, scanning the streets below. She spotted the man in the dark coat, watching the safe house. He was getting closer, Hez watching, waiting. Chapter 7. 3 days later, Elizabeth and Anna boarded the Argentine research vessel, Almirante Brown, bound for Antarctica. The ship was small and cramped, but it was their ticket to the frozen continent. Nuala had assured them that they would be safe on board the Almirante Brown. But Elizabeth couldn't shake her suspicion. She kept a close eye on the crew, trying to determine who she could trust. The voyage was long and monotonous. The ship sailed south, through increasingly cold and turbulent waters. The landscape became bleak and desolate, with towering icebergs and endless stretches of snow and ice. As they approached Antarctica, Elizabeth noticed a strange pattern in the ice formations. They seemed to be arranged in a deliberate way, forming a kind of pathway. She mentioned it to Anna, who dismissed it as a trick of the light, but Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. One evening, Elizabeth overheard a conversation between Mamsela and the ship's captain. They were speaking in hushed tones, discussing something that she couldn't quite make out. But she heard Mamsela mention the Valhalla project and the Nazi base. Elizabeth realized that Mamsela was not who he claimed to be. He was a Nazi sympathizer, and he was using the Almirante Brown to locate the secret base. She confronted Anna with her suspicions. Anna was initially skeptical, but Elizabeth convinced her that they were in danger. They decided to take action. They needed to warn the crew about Millela and his true intentions. They approached the ship's first mate, a young officer named Ricardo, whom they had come to trust. They told him everything they knew about Mamsela and the Nazi base. Ricardo was shocked by their revelations. He agreed to help them. Together they gathered the crew and revealed Mamsela's treachery. The crew was outraged. They had been lied to and manipulated. They confronted Mamsela and his loyalists. A fierce fight broke out on the deck of the Almirante Brown. Elizabeth and Anna joined the fray, fighting alongside the crew. They were outnumbered, but they were determined to stop Mamsela from reaching the Nazi base. In the midst of the chaos, Elizabeth spotted the man in the dark coat. He was fighting alongside Mamsela, his face contorted with rage. Elizabeth knew that he was the one who had been following her all along. He was the one who had killed her husband. She confronted him, her eyes blazing with fury. "You killed Klaus," she screamed. The man sneered. "He knew too much. Just like you." They fought a brutal and desperate struggle on the icy deck of the Almirante Brown. Elizabeth was no match for the man's superior strength, but she refused to give up. Just as he was about to deliver the final blow, Anna intervened, knocking him off balance. Elizabeth seized the opportunity and lunged at him, stabbing him with a small knife she had been carrying. The man cried out in pain and collapsed on the deck. Elizabeth stood over him, panting, her body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. The fight on the Almirante Brown continued, but the tide had turned. The crew, united against Mamsela and his loyalists, began to gain the upper hand. Finally, Mamsela was defeated and taken into custody. The crew secured the ship and set course for Buenos Aires, but Elizabeth knew that their journey was far from over. The Nazi base in Antarctica still existed, and the artifacts on the U-977 were still missing. Her husband deserves justice. Chapter 8. After the mutiny on the Almirante Brown. Ricardo, now acting captain, agreed to help Elizabeth and Anna locate the Nazi base in Antarctica. He felt a sense of responsibility for what had happened and wanted to see justice done, using the coordinates from the last transmission of U-977 and the strange patterns in the ice formations. They navigated the Almirante Brown towards a remote and desolate region of the continent. After days of searching, they spotted something unusual on the horizon. A dark, jagged mountain range shrouded in mist and snow. It looked out of place, almost unnatural. As they drew closer, they noticed a hidden opening in the mountainside, a narrow passage leading into the darkness. This was it. The entrance to the Nazi base. Ricardo anchored the Almirante Brown, a safe distance from the entrance, and prepared a landing party. Elizabeth and Anna insisted on joining, despite the danger. They boarded a small inflatable boat and cautiously approached the opening in the mountainside. The air was cold and still, and the silence was broken only by the sound of their oars dipping into the water. As they entered the passage, the darkness closed in around them. They switched on their flashlights, illuminating the icy walls of the tunnel. The passage led to a vast underground cavern. The cavern was lit by a series of flickering torches, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the center of the cavern, they saw it. The Nazi base. It was a sprawling complex of buildings and tunnels, carved into the ice and rock. The base was surprisingly well preserved, as if it had been abandoned only recently. They cautiously disembarked from the boat and began to explore the base. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the echo of their footsteps. They found living quarters, a mess hall, a laboratory, and a command center. The base was filled with Nazi memorabilia, flags, posters, and portraits of Hitler. In the laboratory, they found evidence of strange experiments. Test tubes, beakers, and scientific instruments were scattered across the tables. They also found journals and notebooks, filled with cryptic notes and diagrams. It was clear that the Nazis had been conducting some kind of research in this base. But what were they looking for? What were they trying to achieve? In the command center, they found a large map of Antarctica, marked with various symbols and coordinates. One particular location was circled in red, a remote and uncharted region of the continent. Elizabeth realized that this was where the artifacts from U-977 must be hidden. This was where the secrets of the Valhalla project were buried. They decided to head to that location. They knew it was dangerous, but they had to find out what the Nazis were hiding. They followed the map, navigating through treacherous terrain and icy blizzards. After days of traveling, they reached their destination. It was a vast snow-covered plain, surrounded by towering glaciers. In the center of the plain, they saw something that made their blood run cold. A massive pyramid, constructed of black stone. It rose out of the ice like a jagged tooth, a monument to darkness and despair. They approached the pyramid cautiously, their hearts pounding in their chests. The air around it was strangely charged, as if filled with some kind of invisible energy. As they got closer, they noticed a hidden entrance in the side of the pyramid. A narrow passage leading into the darkness. They knew that they had reached the end of their journey. They were about to uncover the truth about the U-977 and the Valhalla project, but they also knew that they were walking into a trap. The Nazis were waiting for them. It was too late to turn back. The past was calling to them. Chapter 9. Elizabeth, Anna, and Ricardo entered the black stone pyramid, the entrance ceiling shut behind them with a resounding thud. The air inside was frigid, biting at exposed skin. The only light came from their flashlights, which danced across the walls, revealing intricate carvings of bizarre creatures and long-forgotten symbols. The Yuanjun notation was repeated endlessly, etched into every surface. They descended deeper, the passage winding downwards into the heart of the pyramid. The carvings became more frequent, more disturbing. They depicted scenes of ritual sacrifice, ancient battles, and beings that were neither human nor animal. A low hum permeated the air, vibrating through their bones. It grew stronger as they ventured further, filling their heads with a dizzying sense of dread. Suddenly, the passage opened into a vast chamber. In the center of the chamber stood a massive stone altar, stained with what appeared to be dried blood. Behind the altar, a colossal statue loomed, depicting a winged figure with a serpent's head. And there, standing before the altar, were a group of men in Nazi uniforms. They were chanting in a guttural language, their eyes glazed over with fanaticism. Leading them was a figure Elizabeth recognized instantly, Captain zur See Mahler. He was no longer the grizzled old man she had met in Buenos Aires. He seemed younger, stronger, radiating an aura of malevolent power. "Welcome, Frau Richter," Manuela said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I've been expecting you." Elizabeth stared at him, her hand instinctively reaching for the knife hidden beneath her coat. "What is this place?" she demanded. "This," Mahler said, gesturing around the chamber, "is the gateway to Valhalla, the place where the ancient gods will return and usher in a new era of Aryan supremacy," Elizabeth scoffed. "You're insane," Mahler smiled. "Perhaps, but I'm also on the verge of achieving something that no one else has ever achieved. I'm about to unlock the secrets of the tablet." He pointed to a small, intricately carved box, resting on the altar. The fragments of the tablet that your husband was carrying on the U-977, they are all here. And when I assemble them, I will unleash the power of the gods. Elizabeth realized that Mamsler was not just a Nazi sympathizer. He was a true believer, a fanatic who was willing to do anything to achieve his twisted vision. "You won't get away with this," she said. Mahler laughed. "You think you can stop me? You are just one woman, and you are already too late." He turned to his followers and raised his hands. "Prepare the ritual." The Nazis began chanting louder, their voices reaching a fever pitch. Masler opened the box and carefully removed the fragments of the tablet. As he began to assemble the fragments,